Today we're going to be looking at how to animate our character animation toolkit that we made from another video. And specifically we're going to be talking about cat motion, which is a way that cat allows us to create walk, run, sneak cycles without having to do a whole lot of setup on our own. It's going to give us a lot of parameters that we can change, but the basics of the animation is going to be created for us. So to do so, what I'm going to do is select one of my bones. It doesn't really matter which one. And I'm going to make sure I'm in the Motion tab. And what we can see is we have what's called a layer manager. What a layer manager does is it stores all of the animations that we have created and how we use them. So what I'm going to do is, as we see here, we have a red circle with a red square, which means that we don't have any animation mode going or happening. So what I'm going to do is come down to where by default it says ABS, which is an absolute layer. And I'm going to click and hold and come down to the very bottom to where I see looks like a green man running. This is our cat motion. So from here I have a cat motion layer, I can see that I have keys already placed for us. On each one of our bones we'll see different keys. But if I scrub my timeline or if I play my timeline, I don't see anything happening. And the reason is because I still am not in an animation mode. I'm in setup mode. It would be like if we were in figure mode in our biped. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold, or I can just click. So what I'm going to do is click that red circle with the red square to go from setup mode to animation mode. And what I'll see is that my character is already in a different position. And if I either scrub or if I play my animation, I'll see my character walking. Now it may not look as good as you want it to, or it may look a little silly, but what we're going to do is we're going to come in and change some of these parameters and go over these parameters so you'll know what we can change and what each one does, and hopefully get this to look a little bit better. Like I said, it does do a base and it is doing a basic walk. We're just going to come in and make that look a little bit better for us. So from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the green circle with the paw in it, or cat motion editor. And what I'll see is a little box come up. We have a whole lot of parameters that we can play with. If you do have a preset, or let's say that you have you've worked with maybe a dog or whatever and you did a cat motion for the dog and you saved it, then it will be available. Here we only have 2 legs by default, animations for 2 legs. So that would be good for our alien character and maybe we'll play with him, but for us we're going to have to create one from scratch, and that's okay. So on globals we have the start range and the end range. So maybe we wanted like let's just say a 30 frame walk cycle. So I'm going to change my end to 30. And then my max step time. So for example, if I wanted, let's change this to 30 and see what happens. And I'm going to change my time frame to 30. So what we see is our first frame and our last frame is the same. So because our start is 0 and end and our max step time is the same as our end, we have 1 walk cycle. So this is good if we want to have what's called a loop. And if we're doing video games or movies or anything that we want to be able to use that animation over and over, then we definitely want it to loop. Our max stride length is how far we're trying to walk. So maybe we'll change that to 100. And we'll see that our limb controllers have gotten closer together. And hopefully we'll see this leg where it's not trying to stretch out quite so far. There we go. So now we don't have abnormal bending of our leg, which is awesome. Or maybe we want to have huge strides. And we'll see it trying to reach those as well. Let's do something silly just to see. That's pretty funny. So we'll take this back to 100, where we were before. We've got like a maybe a nice little walk. Okay, direction. So if we wanted to go completely sideways, let's say what happens if we do 180. Oh, we're going backwards. Okay, awesome. We do 90. So what we should see here is it looks like we're trying to go sideways. So we're trying to walk sideways. So that's really powerful when we're trying to create walk cycles for front, going forward, going backwards, and going to the side. That's really a good thing we can use there. And then the gradient, maybe we want to create walk cycles for going up a hill. So maybe we'll say like a 40% gradient. Okay, and then we have the character shape and the retargeting, which we're not going to look at too far. If we want to walk on spot, which we're doing, if we want to walk on a line should take us forward. Depending on what engine you use, if you're doing this for a video game, if you have to have the motion in the root, then that will depend on whether you want to use walk on spot or walk on line. So we're just going to walk on spot so that we can see what's going on all the time. Okay, so limb phases is how we want our footfalls to be. That means when we want our feet and our arms to hit the ground or swing back and forth. So for that, I kind of like how it is so far. I might change just a little bit so it's not completely. Maybe change this one to be just a little bit different. Maybe change this one to be just a little bit different. And maybe this one to be a little bit different. Just to kind of get a little bit of variety. Okay, and then from there we can go into our groups. So our first pelvis that we created, which was here. We have the pelvis, twist, roll, pitch, lift, push, weight shift, offset, position, and offset rotation. And I know that this might seem like it's a little bit much, but the more you play around with it and the more you understand what these does, honestly, the easier it's going to be. So the twist. So we have our twist. We can change this to be more if we want to, and we can see what happens when we do. So we have that twist motion there. So maybe if we pull this back up, we can see exactly what this does. You see how it's pushing there, or twisting rather. So we can change that to be kind of how we want. All right, we'll bring that back up here. Okay, and then the roll. Let's see what happens if we change. Sometimes we can just change it just to see what happens. Okay, so now we can see what happens. And if we want it to be less, we can make these curves less. Okay, pitch. Again, we don't have anything with pitch, but let's just see if we can figure out what the pitch does. Okay. So here we can see that it's what our pitch is doing, pitching it forward. If we wanted it to do something like that, we don't. And the lift is going to be how much of a lift we have on the z-axis. So that one I don't particularly like how much lift that it's doing. So maybe we'll make that a little bit smaller. And push. Let's see what push does for us. Okay. Maybe we'll change this a little bit. Let's let it think for a minute. Okay, there we go. Okay, then the weight shift. Let's see what happens if we change one of these. Oh, okay, so we've got our sideways motion there. And that for me is a little bit much. So I'm going to bring these so we don't have quite as much weight shift there. Okay, so we have just a little bit. I'm going to go back to that push. Okay, so we've messed around with one pelvis group. Maybe we have that how we like it. And the second one, we do the same thing. Well, one thing we didn't go through were the legs and the tail. So let's go through that. So knee angle, and we're talking about these legs here. One thing I do want to do is pull the legs back so that they're not hitting these front legs so much. Let's see if we can get to that. Okay, we can see that now our knee is going outwards. See if we can make that more pronounced. There we go. So that's definitely not where we want it. Okay. Twist. Here we can see the knees going outwards to the side of the body. Cross swing. Have that same kind of motion going on there, but I don't want to play around with that, so we'll leave it alone. Now I know the video is getting kind of long, but there are some things that I want to go over that weren't in the pelvis itself. So we have talked about the swing, the offset. Let's talk about the leg weight. And this is, if I bring this out and bring this one out. The one thing that I want to talk about, I believe, is in the foot platform. We have the push, which I believe is, if we see how we kind of hang for just a second. Let me do that a little bit longer so we can see it. So I do like that. Our lift is how high our foot goes. So if I do that up, we'll see it definitely go higher. Okay. So we can see our step shape, how it's changing, how our legs are moving. Okay, so we've played around a little bit with the legs, we played around with the pelvis. We can do the same thing with the arms. Let's stop this real quick. Okay, go back into our cat motion editor, bring that back up with our pelvis. We have the same things that we could do there with our pelvis and the legs and the ankle and whatnot. Now the tail we didn't mess with. Let's see, let's go look at the tail here. So it's not really doing anything right now. Let's see if we can get it to do a little something. Maybe do a little something. And to move these curves, all I'm doing is just mousing over the edge of one and right-clicking and holding and moving where I want it to be. And just playing around with these curves. See if we can get something that we like. If you don't like it one way, try it the other way. That's all we're doing, is just playing around with it anyway until we get something that we like. So there's the basics of cat motion. And I would say go ahead and play around with it. Create something you like. And the cool thing is that we can go back and change those global presets, or the globals rather, to make completely different walks if we wanted to. So go ahead and play around with that. And in the next video, we'll talk about how we can create animations from scratch without using cat motion, and how we can use other animations that we create to manipulate ones we already have. So until then, have fun.